Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining me. So, guys, it's been another wild ride. So, NATO are now threatening China. You know, it seems like day after day there's more headlines that you just watch and you're like, wow, I can't believe that's happening. All the time in the UK, we seem to be fixated on this upcoming election, like it's gonna have any effect on what's happening, on what's going to happen by the end of the year. Excuse me. So Jens Stoltenberg, again, he's come out. I think he's going to resign pretty soon. But what he's basically saying is that NATO need to sanction China because China is supplying Russia with components for their weapons that they're then using to attack Ukraine. Now, as far as I'm concerned, you're seeing lines in the sand and we shouldn't really be, shocked or, pointing the finger because it is what it is. China is allied with Russia, the BRICS nations, and it's the BRICS nations, it's one of their goals to de-dollarize the world. So we shouldn't be looking at this and with any amount of outrage. We should just accept it for what it is, and then we need to act accordingly. We shouldn't take things personal because this is just how things are going now, guys. And if we start to take things personal, we'll get emotionally attached and we won't make the right decisions. Excuse me. So if you remember yesterday, what we was talking about on yesterday's video, if you've not watched that, guys, go and watch it now. And guys, 30% of you who watch my videos don't like and don't follow and press those buttons behind. So if you could do them now, that would be fantastic. But yeah, yesterday's video, we talked about the nuclear weapons being taken out of storage and put into, being refurbished and then deployed. It's a big step for them to be taken out of storage and refurbished because, lots of reasons I went into yesterday. I said, it's all well and good having 1 million nuclear weapons or whatever it is in storage. It's then a very long, well, it's not a long road, but it's a technical road to then get those weapons, put them in a deployable system and then use them. So, that chain and that process has now started. So remember I said about the F16s and how I think that the use and the air power that's going into Ukraine in the sense of F16s, the Ukrainians starting to attack the Russian air defences. I said this is all leading, and I see this leading towards the use of low-yield tactical nuclear weapons. But I'll come on to the F16s later, guys. Excuse me, I've got a little bit of a cold. So yeah, yesterday, you remember Jens Stoltenberg, he started to talk about China and Russia in the same context. And I don't think anyone from NATO has done this before. Talking about China and Russia are allies and they are, in the same trench, if want of a better word. So absolutely insane. Now, those of you who've been watching this channel, you'll know something that I say, the tactical tiptoe. So you'll see, you've seen other world leaders do it, and I think Jens Stoltenberg, I think he's doing the tactical tiptoe now. Yesterday I wasn't sure, I'm a little bit more sure now. So he'll push and he'll push and he'll push these boundaries, and then all of a sudden he'll either resign or he'll leave post, or something will happen, and then Jens Stoltenberg's not there anymore. He's not a target, he's not a threat, but he's opened up. He's opened up that wound, for want of a better word. So everybody else then can push forwards. They can say, hey, this is the norm now. This is what we do. But obviously, it's a tactical tiptoe. Look just like President Macron. What's his first name? Emmanuel Macron. He's done exactly the same. He was pushing, and then he called for a snap election. Was this by design or was this just fluke? Either way, in France, you will have either a new government that's got a mandate to go to war with Russia, or a new government, but in the sense that Macron will have a new mandate and he will win the election, or a new government, i.e. Le Pen, will move in, and then she can say, oh, this wasn't done by me, this was Macron. So either way, this war's going forwards, but it's just they need that 4 years without an election to be moving forwards. Look at Boris Johnson, guys. I don't know what you think about Boris Johnson. I voted for Boris Johnson. All right. When I saw him at the 2012 Olympics on the on the zip wire with the 2 Union flags, I just thought he is my guy. you know, that's my opinion, guys, right? But he did go to Ukraine. He did allegedly push for the cessation of peace talks. I don't know whether that's a thing. There's a lot of people that are saying it, that they are. I wasn't there, I didn't see it, but that's what a lot of people are saying. Obviously, Boris Johnson did the tactical tiptoe as well. He went out, he pushed the war, allegedly, and then he's gone. He's not a threat, he's not in the public eye anymore. Then we've got Joe Biden. Joe Biden's been pushing for Ukraine, more weapons for Ukraine, and then Joe Biden's going to... I don't see any circumstances at the moment where Joe Biden can win another election. Did you watch the... what was it? There was an... go on, I'm thinking now. I'm going off the cuff, guys. I am going off the cuff. There was like... there was Joe Biden and Barack Obama on an... like on a stage somewhere. I think it was like, I don't know, music awards or something. And... sorry. And Joe Biden, he's like, he's standing there again, and he just freezes. And he's looking around and he doesn't know what to do. And then Barack Obama is like, come on, Joe. And go watch the video, guys. I'll try and find a link and put it in the description. And then, you know, Barack Obama, he grabs Joe's hand and he's like, he literally like pushes him off stage. It's absolutely hilarious. And when you think about America, out of the whole, you know, America's huge. I'm sure that they can find a better candidate than Joe Biden. Guys, love him or hate him, you know, you can't deny that he's got mental health problems. It's absolutely hilarious, you know. I mean, the guy struggles to get through a sentence, and you know, he's talking about having a debate with... he's coming out and he's saying he's going to have a debate with Donald Trump. I mean, Donald Trump, guys, again, love him or hate him, he's fast, he's witty, he's articulate. I remember when he went on, and again, I'm going off script here, you know, he did the, you know, he did the interview on MSNBC or something, and he set the reporter up. So he's there, Donald Trump, and there's this reporter, this woman, and she's been really aggressive to Donald Trump, and she said, he led her into saying something to him, and then he pulled out of his pocket the actual facts, and he said, well, actually, this is what happened here. I've got it here for you, wrote down. And he just proved her to be a liar on, you know, on national TV. It was hilarious. So the fact that Joe Biden thinks he can, like, have a debate with Donald Trump, it's hilarious, guys. Absolutely insane. Also, going back to Macron as well, guys. So President Macron and, well, France, I don't know if you know this, but France own reserve ownership over their nuclear weapons. So like the UK, for example, they can let other countries use their nuclear weapons, so can the US and, you know, other countries. The US is the main one. But France keep ownership over their own nuclear arsenal. They don't loan it out to anyone else, which I think's interesting in the context of Macron pushing, because, you know, France on their own are a nuclear superpower. Excuse me. So when I mentioned the F16s earlier, and I said, you know, I think the push towards these F16s is kind of like, you know, a go date. If you remember a couple of weeks back, I did a video about the Polish pilots basically wanting to intercept missiles over Ukraine. So what that is basically, when, you know, one of these missiles is fired from wherever, and it looks like it's heading towards Poland or anywhere in that airspace, Polish jets will be scrambled. But the problem is that Polish jets can't cross over the border and they can't shoot anything down over Ukraine. So the Polish pilots and the Polish Air Force's argument is, look, we're being scrambled anyway, we're in the air, all we have to do is press a button, we can fire one of our missiles, it can air-to-air strike the missile that's going to hit Ukraine, and we can save a lot of lives. That argument, guys, is absolutely solid. You can't argue against that, alright? Polish aircraft stay in Polish airspace, they take down missiles that are going to hit Ukrainian civilian populations. Okay, you can't argue with that argument, right? Because you can't. Now, the problem here is where these lines become murky and where these lines become blurred, because after a couple of days or a couple of weeks or whatever of Polish pilots doing this, it could then be a stage of, okay, we're gonna fly a little bit into Ukraine, only 20 kilometers. We are only going to cross 20 kilometers. That'll give us the reach to get a little bit further and protect more people. Okay, fine. And you see with mission creep, you could have a situation where soon you have Polish pilots flying from Poland, then doing defensive sorties over Ukraine. Okay, again, you know, defensive sorties, we're saving people's lives, absolutely fine. There's no argument against that. Okay, fine. Let's think about what they've said as well about the Ukrainian F16s being kept outside of Ukraine to keep them safe. And again, you know, guys, this is a war, all right? Your military is a target in a war. That's the end of it. You can't really argue that. But the Ukrainians have now, they've come out and they've said that some of their F16s are not going to be kept in Ukraine. Okay, fine. That's absolutely fine. So how do we know what these aircraft are when they leave Poland? Is it a Polish aircraft going for a defensive sortie? Is it some sort of replacement for, is that aircraft going to go and land at a Ukrainian airbase for servicing? Is it going to be a transport for repairs? Is it going to be a transport for upgrades? Is it going to be a transport for training? So you see now how we've got this network of lots of plausible explanations for why all these F-16s are flying around. And don't forget, these things are not going to have transponders on them. So it's going to be very difficult to understand whether it's a Polish F-16 flying a defensive sortie, a Ukrainian F-16 flying a training mission, flying back to Poland for upgrades, flying back to Poland for repairs, flying back to Poland for servicing. And all of this time you're getting more aircraft flying around, and you'll have, you know, and once they get shot down, you know, the Ukrainians, NATO will claim, oh, this wasn't a Ukrainian aircraft, this was a Polish aircraft on a defensive mission, or this was a Ukrainian mission, but it was going back to, this aircraft wasn't flying from Poland, this was going back to Poland for repairs, or it was setting off from Poland to come to Ukraine for, because one of their aircraft had been lost, and then while it was in the air, it got called out on an offensive mission. You see where we're going, guys, all right? I don't ever think these aircraft are going to be realistically flown from Ukraine. The Russians, they're too dominant over that area. They've got too much infrastructure and they've got too much capacity. I honestly think that they're only going to be flown from inside NATO borders. Excuse me. So that brings me on to the pilot shortage. So I was reading an article that, you know, I think they've trained like 3 pilots or something, but the number of pilots, the number of pilots that the Ukrainians have got for these F-16s is really, really, really low. So where are we going to get these pilots from? Santa Claus? So think about it, guys, okay? You've got the Ukrainian Foreign Legion. Now, the Ukrainian Foreign Legion was right back in 2022. Vladimir Zelensky, he said, right, okay, anybody who wishes, any foreign people, ex-military, want to come and fight in Ukraine, we'll make it official, we'll make a Ukrainian Foreign Legion, and that will have, you know, non-Ukrainians fighting for Ukraine, but it will be all official, just like the French Foreign Legion. And you could kind of argue like the British Gurkha Regiment, I think, but people argue that the Gurkha Regiment is a mercenary regiment in the British military, but that's a different story for a different time, guys, and I don't want to touch it now. Anyway, what I want to focus on here is the Ukrainian Foreign Legion. I think that could extend to pilots as well, if it's not done already. So what you would have Ukrainian pilots that just happen to be American, Ukrainian pilots that just happen to be Canadian, just happen to be Polish. These would be civilians who have now enrolled as a Ukrainian fighter pilot in the Ukrainian Foreign Legion. And these guys would get paid by, you know, they would get paid a basic salary by, and again, I'm just speculating here, this is how I do it. I would pay them a basic salary as per the Ukrainian Air Force would get paid. Then on the side of that, through some sort of NGO or state-sponsored humanitarian aid package, I would then give them a hefty per diem. So I would give them like X amount of pounds, I don't know, call it $1,000 a day as per diem. And that per diem is not pay, It's not pay. That per diem, £1,000 a day, would be for things like accommodation, food, drink, clothes, anything else you need for that system. So then the Ukrainians would say, no, we do not have any NATO pilots. And they don't. All the pilots would be Ukrainian pilots. And then they could say, no, we're not paying anyone else any different. And no, they wouldn't. They wouldn't be paying them any different. They would be paying them the same. But then the pilots, and this is just my speculation, the pilots would then be through some organisation, some NGO, some state-sponsored project, would be getting a hefty per diem for their services. Guys, when it comes down to training, and I can speak from a military point of view, I'm speaking from an infantry point of view, not Air Force. You can't get trained in 12 weeks, 13, whatever, it doesn't matter. You can't get trained up to the standard of someone who's got 22 years experience flying that aircraft. It just doesn't happen, guys, all right? You can tick all the boxes, but without that experience, you can't do it. Think about if you drive a car. When you pass your test to how you drive now, it is worlds apart. So if the Ukrainians can get these experienced pilots in the experienced aircraft, then that is all, it's a whole new, it's a whole new dimension for this war. And then you've got to think about the perspective from the Russian side. And nobody thinks about the perspective from the Russian side. You've got Russian civilians there, Chinese civilians, who want nothing to do with this war, just like everyone else. We're like, whoa, I don't want anything to do with this. They're dropping bombs and stuff. I just want to take my kids to school and push my daughter on the swings. That's what most people want. So imagine this now, guys, from the Russian perspective, the Chinese perspective. And of course, the Russians, they're not stupid. They are going to know that these guys are NATO trained pilots, probably with American, British, Canadian accents. They're going to be flying NATO aircraft. Now the F16, it's, the airframe is like, I don't know, 50-year-old, well, I think a little bit older, but it's an old airframe, but the aircraft itself isn't old. They're constantly being rebuilt, they're being upgraded. So when people are saying it's a 50-year-old aircraft, yes, it is, but it's still head and shoulders above what the Ukrainians have now. So, you've got NATO-trained pilots with NATO accents, flying NATO planes with NATO target impacts and NATO sources. Tell me from the Russian side of it, they are not at war with NATO. So if they're already at war with NATO, why are they not going to keep pushing and keep pushing further and further and further if they can? That's what we really, really, really run the risk of here, guys, all right? If this air campaign that's coming, guys, if anybody thinks this air campaign is not coming, they're absolutely deluded. So with this air campaign that's inbound, that's coming, if this air campaign is not successful, what is going to come next? What can we throw at Russia next? Because if they can absorb this air attack. Remember when the HIMARS, high mobility rocket system or something? Basically, it's a truck that you can put a lot of rockets in, different rockets in the back. Remember when that was the key? That was going to push the Russians back. That was going to do this. What did the Russians do? They jammed the GPS modules on the rockets, so they were useless. Okay, right, that doesn't work. What's next? Right, A1 Abrams tank. Send the A1 Abrams tank. That'll have the end of them. Again, I've done a video on this before, guys. The A1 Abrams, the Challenger 2, the Leopard 2. All these tanks failed. I mean, these tanks, expensive tanks, like $3-4 million. They failed and they were being taken out. They were being taken out by cheap $500 drones. Okay, cost effectiveness there, guys. They are taking $3.5 million of our money. Well, I'm British, guys, so I'm saying I'm on this side. They're taking $3.5 million of our cash, and they're destroying it with $500 of their cash. Guys, we can't financially, we can't sustain that. So that's why I'm pretty confident, I think that these aircraft were announced that, people just looked at them and said, right, we can't do this. And again, there's other reasons why the tanks failed. The ground was too soft. The Ukrainian operators, again, they're not versed on them. They don't know how to use the tanks in conjunction with infantry. They were just using them as fire support. So that's how they were using. They weren't using them in a tactical manner. They weren't using them in conjunction with infantry, and they certainly weren't using them in conjunction with air assets. They were kind of using each one as a standalone system. But anyway, guys, I can go into that deeper if you want. Yeah, so also we've had Putin visiting North Korea. Now, for those of you who don't know, just look at how people live in North Korea. I'm not going to go into it now, guys, because I have to be very careful what I say, because videos can get scrubbed. Look at the things that happen in North Korea. Look at the food supply in North Korea. Look at the amounts of authoritarianism. It's absolutely insane. And the reality is we probably don't know half of it, right? So we don't know half of what's going on in North Korea. And if half of the stuff that we do think is going on is actually going on, then that place is an absolutely wild place to live, and I wouldn't want to live there myself. So what do we know? Well, allegedly, North Korea supplies weapons to Russia. Why do I say allegedly? I've never seen it. All I've done is read reports and read articles and watched videos and seen it on the news. Whether they do or not, I don't know. I would suspect they do, but who knows? Who knows what's happening in this absolutely crazy world? Anyway, so what can we expect from this visit to North Korea by Vladimir Putin? We can probably expect them to identify and bolster their security arrangements and their security agreements. I think my personal opinion is that they will be concentrating a lot on cyber, because as we're moving forwards, North Korea's got a lot of cyber attacks, so I'm told, originate from North Korea. Obviously, we can't prove that. We don't know the reality, but so we're told in Western media, in Western reports, that they originate from North Korea. So as we move forward, remember the top 10 list, not my top 10 list of civilian soft targets. At number 1, I had cyber, because cyber can affect everything. You can hit financial systems, you can hit, you can hit utilities, you can hit transport, you can hit the NHS, you can hit doctors, all this sort of stuff that are soft targets, because all it takes is somebody to put the wrong USB stick into the wrong computer, or right, whichever way you're looking at it, and the whole system is, the whole system's down, and then you have to have an expert to come over, and then it has to be forensically examined. So the whole system with cyber, I feel that's what they're going to be concentrating on a lot. Of course, they're going to be, they'll be looking at more agreements for North Korea to produce mass-produced weapon systems for them. Whatever that is, we don't know, but I think the future days will tell. Also, the delegation that's going with Putin is very interesting, because they've got, I think Sergei Lavrov's going with him, or in fact, I'm not sure the exact delegation, but as I understand it, they've got their space minister or something. So I think the fact that he's going, they're going to be talking about space. Remember, North Korea now has a competent rocket program, and they can launch satellites. So there's a space war going on above us right now as we are talking. We have communication satellites, we have military satellites. We have surveillance satellites, we have all sorts of stuff. And for every one of our, like a NATO satellite or a Western satellite, you're probably going to have an adversary satellite following that as a chase satellite. And that's going to be taking information, it's going to be listening, it's going to be trying to gather as much information as it can whilst doing its own job. And worst case scenario, these things will crash into each other. The real threat, it came out a while ago about Putin and his space-based nuclear weapons and his, I don't take any credit. I don't think that's the real threat. I think that was smoke and mirrors. I think the real threat, and the more realistic threat for me, remember guys, alright, remember what we said about nuclear weapons. They degrade over time. So you're going to put a nuclear weapon into space. These nuclear launchers, they're not it's not, they're not gentle when they go up there. These things shake, you know, they shake, they rattle, things fall out of place. And I think there's too many risks in sending a nuclear weapon into space. It just doesn't make sense to me. When are you going to use it? If you don't use it, that thing is going to decay. If it decays, your whole satellite's gone. So when they were all talking about, you know, Russia is going to launch space nuclear weapons, I was like, no, they're not. The real threat, I believe, is from ground-based lasers. So, you know, we've already seen the ground-based lasers from the UK, and I was one of the first people to say that these the Dragonfire, the UK's Dragonfire system that was built to target drones. I said, okay, that was built for a request 5 years ago. That, you know, this Dragonfire, and I've done it before, guys, but basically the Dragonfire laser, it can't deal with these cheap $500 drones that have got explosives in them that can take out $3 million tanks. It can't deal with them. It can only deal with the target up to 2 kilometers. And the reason that was built, it was built to take out a big expensive system that was moving relatively dictatable on a flight path that was easy to track. These small drones that are moving around, it's almost impossible to track them with a laser. Because don't forget, that laser has to be very specific on a certain point on that drone. And once that drone makes an evasive maneuver, it's going to move left, it's going to move right, it's going to move up, it's going to move down. That needs to then, the radar or whatever is tracking that, needs to understand it's moved. It then needs to send a signal to the hydraulics that are operating the laser. Then the laser needs to move. And all this takes a couple of seconds. And that couple of seconds, if it's moved again by the time it's moved, it's just not going to work, guys. But when we are talking about satellites kind of have to be in a known orbit. It's why they're satellites, all right? That's what keeps them up there. Relative horizontal velocity in comparison to the Earth. So these things are moving in a really stable flight path at a very, very constant speed. They can't speed up, they can't slow down, they can't really move. So when one of these satellites goes over, I don't know, North Korea, it's very easy for them to lock onto this satellite with a ridiculously high-powered laser. And over time, yes, of course, they're not going to shoot it out of the sky initially, but over time, they can degrade these satellites, they can degrade the optics, they can degrade the solar panels, and over time, these satellites will be, they will be obsolete. That's why Elon Musk launched, and again, guys, I'm going off tangent, but that's why Elon Musk launched his, what's it called, his Starlink satellite, because each one of those satellites are small, it's easy to replace, and and there's plenty of redundancy. But these big military satellites that are in, they're in relatively slow orbits, they're easy to spot, they're easy to find, and they're easy to fire lasers at. So that's what I think the real threat from space, the real space threat is, not these nuclear, not Russian nuclear space nukes or whatever they're called. I think that's just the headline grabber. So, Putin's trip to North Korea will also be identifying new partnerships. Remember, there's the BRICS nations. You're going to see the greater divide between East and West. And, you're literally seeing things happen now in real time. If you sit back from this and just put the perspective on, put some of my glasses on and say, right, Sean thinks all these roads lead to war. And when you look at all these things from the peripheries, you see them as clear as day. All these directions where they move towards conflict. And the further I don't feel there's any way. In fact, Russell Brand did a video earlier. What did he do? I should do a reaction video to it. So Russell, he's saying, Putin's looking for peace and NATO's turning it down. I love Russell Brand in his videos, but he doesn't know. I'd love to take him out to Ukraine and show him and get him to speak to some Ukrainians, get him to speak to some of the people who've lived this life and who know and some of the atrocities that have happened, all right? It's like you know, and there's a lot of people in the West who just don't see this. Anyway, guys, I've waffled for almost 30 minutes. I want to try and get some more videos out today, so I'm going to cut it for there. If you want me to talk more about space and, you know, the space threat and space warfare, let me know in the comments, guys, because not many people want me to talk about that, but it is a really big topic. Obviously, it's one of those things that we can't see. We don't really see it happening, but it's happening all around us, and it's, you know, it's happening just as intensely up there than it is on the ground. And each country's got their own agendas, they've got their own systems, they've got their own alliances. But anyway, guys, let me know what you guys think in the comments, and I'm going to mag to grid.